Good morning. I have an update regarding the purchases of body cameras for the Wichita Police Department. And before I get into that, I have a few comments to make. First off, the Wichita Police Department strives to be a leader in police technology and equipment. Since November of 2011, the Wichita Police Department has purchased 20 Axon cameras to be in all 4 bureaus, each bureau, recording interactions between police and the public to increase both officer and citizen accountability, and that's the goal. The Department of Justice report identified both perceived benefits and perceived concerns. These perceived benefits include enhanced transparency and improved behavior by both citizens and officers. Perceived concerns include privacy issues for both police officers and citizens as well. We have specific outcomes and performance measures that we want to capture. Now, our expected outcomes and performance measures are reduction in workers' compensation and public liability claims, reduction of use of force incidences, reducing citizen complaints, and 3 measures will be general liability claims per capita, use of force incident number of external citizen complaints, and we hope to impact those by reducing them. Now, the cost and options, and that's the main reason we're here today, to finance a body-worn camera system for the Wichita Police Department is first, in order to understand the magnitude of the project, it's helpful to look at the money involved. Remember, we have initial outlay as well as ongoing costs. The initial capital outlay would be for 444 cameras at an estimate cost of $577,200. In that, we need 74 docking stations. That's also an additional cost of $148,000, and an estimated $25,000 in IT equipment and $177,000 for connectivity infrastructure needs that would also be required. So that total for that number would be $927,200. The next consideration was where do we find the money? We looked at sources like grants, narc seizure funds, CIP resources, the general fund, and the stabilization reserve fund. Operating cost options were the initial outlay was one issue. However, ongoing costs, as I mentioned before, is equally important. The City of Wichita operating budget allocates resources to produce meaningful outcomes in the 4 strategic priority areas. They are ensuring public safety or physical safety, protect property, protect public infrastructure assets, and create a growing community. For the Wichita Police Department, ensuring physical safety and protecting property are the most important of that strategic points. To that extent, an expanding body-wearing camera program supports these strategic areas. However, as I stated before, in looking at all of our options, we've had to make some difficult decisions on how we would fund this, looking internally. One option that seemed to be a possibility is grounding the police helicopter in 2015 and then assessing the future use of that helicopter. I want to stress that this is an option and that we are considering this as a move for 2015. But at the same time, we'll also look at other options during that year. So the air section is an option as far as grounding. The Wichita Police Department's Air Section Patrol has a 2015 budget of $345,891. The current helicopter will need to be replaced within the next 10 years at an estimated cost of $2 million. These are considerations that we looked at. The 10-year cost of the air section, including capital costs, is estimated at $5,789,339. Existing staff of the air section will be impacted as well if we ultimately remove the air section. Now, I had some inquiries also on President Obama's announcement. This past Monday, he proposed new funding to help improve relations between police departments and communities by asking for $263 million in funding for police body cameras. Also in that request was additional training. This program would need to be approved by Congress, but would offer a total of $75 million over 3 years to match state funding for cameras 50%. So helping to pay for more than 50,000 devices overall. These monies could possibly help the department's increasing amount of costs with the purchase of new body-worn cameras, if approved. Now, in conclusion, staff will continue to monitor what President Obama is proposing. We'll also, I think in prior reports, we talked about phasing in cameras in a logical process, such as doing one bureau at a time. The timeline for full implementation has not changed. It's still the end of 2015, and staff will make determinations in the interim as to personnel and when officially, as far as grounding the air section, we're talking 2015. But specifically on the date, we're still working as staff. As with any transition, I'm sure there are questions on timing and money, again, that we can project at this time. But what we wanted to do overall is tell you our initial cost and also talk about ongoing in the plans as far as the air section for the Wichita Police Department. At this time, Mr. Manager, unless you have something else, I'll open up questions.
I just want to just summarize, make it real clear. What the chief is talking about is the initial purchase will be funded through the use of grant funds and from the narcotics seizure fund, and then the ongoing operations for the first year would come from the initial grounding of the helicopter unit, and we're going to be talking then through 15 as we prepare the 2016 budget about the future of that unit and our ability to also permanently fund in a sustainable way the body camera program. So just want to make that real clear in summary.
Can you make that more clear, Bob?
Deb, I can't be any more clear than that.
So you're saying that's the proposal, would be to take grant funds,
Right.
money from the NARC unit, and then shutting down.
Right, and the dollar amounts are in the handout that we gave you. Chief, do you have the exact dollar amounts up for the capital, the two?
What she just said, we're not taking money from the NARC unit.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Not the unit.
It's the seizure funds, right?
Yeah.
Seizure
Yes.
fund.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to be clear, 'cause I know you just said this, but
Yep.
okay, grants, money from narc seizures, that's what's going to go to actually getting those, and then the grounding of the helicopters for the first year, not.
And then we're going to determine the future of the helicopter unit going forward. We need some more time to talk about. And again, right now, that would give us a sustainable funding source for the body cameras. If we can identify another way to do that in the budget and then reinstitute the aerial unit in 2016, then we'll look at doing that. But right now, we need to have a sustainable plan, and that would be how we would go forward if we can't identify any other funding source.
Chief, can you talk about the helicopter right now, what all it's used for, and what you might not, or what you may be missing out on to not have it for here?
Well, we'll lose. Okay. Right now, over time, due to budgetary concerns, flight time has been reduced. We still have staff for the helicopter, but they're on basically an on-call status. If we need them, we call them, they respond, and then the air section goes up. Now, in saying that, there's times that it takes time to get to the air section as well. So by the time they get there, a lot of times the call's over. But right now, they're in a call-up status.
How often would you say you're using it right now?
I couldn't tell you without looking specifically. I know it has reduced over time.
It's budgeted at 200 hours a year right now. We're down to 200 hours.
And Chief, so without that helicopter, how would that affect fighting crime?
Obviously, you know, the need of the helicopter already, it has reduced on being out there. You know, we used to do more proactive calls, be out there when car chases ensued, things like that. So it will impact in that arena. But right now, like I said, they're on the call-out status, and by the time they get there, a lot of times the call's over. So it would impact us overall if we had a serious crime scene. But we're also looking at, if it does happen, other options to our air section. Contracting with others. I mean, there's options on the table still if the ultimate decision is to ground the helicopter.
How long have you guys had it?
Since 1970.
So it's possible that if you do decide to ground the air unit altogether, you may contract with other flight service providers or whatever to
Yes.
do something similar.
Yes, that's similar to what other departments have done throughout the country. We're not the only ones that have been faced with budget challenges. Other departments have had to do the same thing, eliminate air sections, and some of their options have been contracting out services of flight.
Obviously, there were a vital situation, KHP would make their helicopter available.
Oh, yes, we have a partnership with KHP and state, yes.
As federal dollars possibly become available, could that push back the date of purchasing these if you're able to get money from the federal government?
Yes, it could be. And again, we're monitoring whatever comes available. We're staying in tune to, and we'll most certainly try to get those funding. But in the process, we don't want to stop what we're doing. As I said, we want to roll this out in phases and possibly look at by bureau, starting with one station, rolling it out, and then working to the next. And then if federal funding comes or any money comes, that will be entered into the equation.
Now, you talked a lot about the tough decisions that you had to make, and you looked at the air section. Talk to me about those discussions and that process, because it had to be difficult to find $1.5 million.
Oh, yes. If you look at it internally, it's very difficult to look at. But the conversation was about, it centered mainly about the air section, because if you look at what we have, you have the report before you on the options we looked at. The conversation is, the difficult part is we've had this air section since 1970. And we've had conversations with members and staff as well, which makes that difficult. When you have that tool, that's the difficult part to the conversation. But we also recognize this is a national conversation right now about body cameras. Heck, the president is out there even putting money and saying, we're going to do this. So we recognize the need for the department. And we also come to the realization as well that if we're looking at helicopter versus the body cameras, which way do we go? So those were where the conversations came from.
Just to be clear, you're not going to be putting the implementation on any kind of delay, waiting on the Congress or anything like that. You're moving forward, and
Yes.
then if you're able to get money,
Yes.
it will allow you to maybe, if not reinstitute the helicopter, or replace the funds.
That's exactly right.
Somewhere else.
We're not going to slow what we're doing here, but as the manager said, for 2015, the helicopter is an option, say we don't come into any federal money. So we're going to keep moving. Implementation is still set by the end of 15, and we're pushing forward.
Bob, what are the numbers of staff? What are the number of staffs that will be affected in the area? And how many people are going to be?
Right now, 3.
Would they be laid off, or what will be the situation? for that?
We have a lieutenant and a officer and a mechanic. And as in any job, we look at other options for department members, versus laying them off. Part of the hard conversation as well was looking at positions. And one thing as staff that came back, we didn't want to lose any positions. So then we came back, that's where the hard conversations have taken place.
So it's possible that if you get federal funding, that may allow you to put the helicopter back in the air, so to speak? Or
Depending on how much of that federal funding, but you're exactly right.
But the federal funding is just for the equipment, not for operating costs, isn't that right?
Yes, it's equipment we'd still have to do, but that will give us room to use other monies in other areas.
You said you have grants. Do you already have these grants? And where are these grants coming from? You said you're
It's in the packet, but narc seizure and some other things we're using.
grants that you're just moving money. That much flexibility in a grant, you can move that much money.
Yes, and we still have the flexibility to keep our mission going with current operations using the funding. So, yes, we're still okay.
Has your department looked at any more at protocol and how you guys might be implementing these cameras, or is it still?
That's ongoing right now. In fact, I have a captain going to visit with a company, and we're also going to look at other agencies similar to our size and how they rolled this out. And we're looking at IACP studies, and we don't want to make mistakes. Obviously, when you roll this out, you want to make sure it's done the right way, and so we're doing our due diligence in our research as well.
Any idea when final decisions on this funding might take place?
Again, that's ongoing. We wanted to tell you about the initial cost and also the ongoing, but that decision's been made. The helicopter is where we may have options. We're keeping close to the federal funding that may come, which would help. So we're keeping in tune to that as well.
Bob, will you talk about the next step, how this will all...
No, it's a good question, Deb. Before I get to that, Benita, on page 8, and for everyone, the page 8's got a summary of the 10-year financing plan. You had asked about the funding for the actual implementation, the purchase of the cameras. We have a grant, the JAG grant that we receive every year. $100,000 of that would be targeted for the purchase of the cameras, and then the $827,000 out of seizure funds. And those are all earmarked originally for capital expenditures, some operations also out of narcotic seizure. But we will be replacing, as the chief said, cameras have been identified as one of the top priorities for the department. So instead of purchasing some other things that were anticipated with JAG funds and seizure, the body cameras were decided to be the #1 priority for the use of those funds. Yes, Deb, that was a good question on implementation. We'll need to go to the city council to have them authorize probably sometime in the beginning, after the first of the year, the use of the funding of the JAG funds as well as the seizure funds, since that was not originally anticipated in the budget for this purpose. And then the council will also have to approve the purchasing contract or agreement when we decide who we're going to purchase the cameras from. So those will be the two council actions. And again, that will be involved in a procurement process after the first of the year for the cameras. And we'll decide after the results of that process what to bring forward to the council. But we're on a fairly quick timetable because there are a lot of other cities that are looking at body cameras, and we want to make sure that we're in the pipeline so that we can implement at least that first phase as quickly as possible.
So shortly after the first of the year?
Yes.
When you talk about this JAG funding that you guys get every year, what is this money usually used for?
I'm going to let Chief talk about that.
Just equipment needs, vests, bunkers, just various things like that. Equipment needs for the department that we need to do our job.
So this is actually just completely in line using this money for it?
Yes, it is.
You have been working on this for quite a while, but did the protests in Ferguson, did the Obama program, did any of that spur this or accelerate your program to get them?
Yes, I can say probably it did have something to accelerate it. But remember, we already have started incrementally adding body cameras to the department. We were already on board. We were phasing them in. Each year we would incrementally add to that number. And that was the plan to get us up to all the officers.
Can I just add to that? We talked about this at a previous briefing. It's not just what's happening at the national level, it's also the community discussion that we've had. And it started with the East High discussion and the conversations we've had since that time, that the community believes the body cameras is a high priority and again a tool that will help to foster more cooperation in the community and more trust in what we're doing in the police department. And again, it's supported strongly by the police officers. So it's been identified as a Wichita approach and solution, not just because there's something going on in another community.
Talk a little bit more about that, because a lot of nationwide they've been talking about the relationship between police and communities, and you guys met at East High to have this discussion, and there were ideas discussed, and we're seeing implementation now. Is
Right.
this an effort to improve that relationship here locally?
When the chief and I, the mayor, attended that first meeting at East High, we promised that we would have an honest dialogue and we would listen to issues, and that it was a dialogue. It was going to be an ongoing discussion. And so we said we were going to make a good faith effort to try to address the legitimate concerns that came out of that meeting. And so my response is that the body cameras is one step in that. process of telling the community, we heard you and we want to do what's necessary to keep your trust in what we do in law enforcement work.
There's supposed to be a second meeting. What's the progress?
We have the location. We're just working on the date. We're going to be at the Wichita State University Metroplex, and we are working. I think we have a tentative date, but we haven't locked it in. But we should have that pretty quickly because, again, we don't want to just spring it on the public and say, oh, by the way, the meeting's tomorrow. Please come on down.
You think that'll still be before the first of the year?
It will be before the first of the year, and it probably will be in the next 2 weeks.
Yes.
Because I don't want to get us any further into the holidays. And the other thing that I do want to highlight is that will not just be a discussion of our initial report, which we shared with you a week or two ago, and this body camera report, but it's going to be a chance for folks to give us a little bit of feedback in that regard. But then we're going to have a separate session for about an hour where Wichita State's going to facilitate a discussion about the departmental assessment that we're doing and the job description for the next police chief. And so we thought while people were there, that would be a good opportunity for them to also provide feedback into that process.
So
How is
the
that?
issue report's not going to be presented then?
No.
It's going to be added to their...
That's correct. We're going to allow people to have some additional feedback before that report is finished.
Have you had any pushback from the police union over this?
Police union has embraced the camera deployment, purchase and deployment, and so they're fully supportive. We're partners, so to speak, in that regard. Labor and management are in agreement with that approach. The chief has had some initial discussions inside the department on the helicopter unit, and that's one of the reasons why we're talking about making this just a one-year plan and looking at the future of the helicopter unit in more detail, give the chance for the department to talk more about that service. Are there alternative ways of delivering the kind of support that they get from the aerial unit today? The chief talked about at least one alternative would be contracting. We'll look deeper into that. But we want to, again, we're engaging with the public. We also want to make sure we engage with our employees. And so that's why we've made the recommendation the way we have.
And Chief, I have a question about the grants and the funds, the grant funds. We talked a little bit about the effect if the helicopter was not in service. Where would this money have gone, and will that affect how you operate if this money goes to body cam?
Yes, we had ongoing funds coming from the helicopter as well into the account for maintenance and ongoing fees. So that money will be used as well for this project. So if we're grounding in 2015, we have that money. And we're looking at ways to do it. And again, that's the option right now is grounding it.
But what about the JAG resources and the NARC seizures?
As he said, as the manager said, that a priority for us right now is cameras. And we'll look at the other equipment and other needs for the organization. For example, some of our vests have expiration dates, things like that, things that we have to necessarily get. But our priority is with the body cams right now.
So will this slow down your drug seizures, anything in those departments where this money would have gone?
No, obviously this is based on seizures.
But will it slow down?
No.
Okay.
We're not depleting everything.
Okay.
We still have to have money to operate as well. So that money will still be there to operate.
Okay.
Are you actually selling your helicopter? Or?
Oh. Right now it's grounded. I mean, and as Mr. Layton said, we're going to have further conversation with our members internally. But right now in 2015, the option is to ground the helicopter, but not sell.
The report shows what would happen if we were to just totally shut down the unit. And it does talk about selling the helicopter, what we would do with those proceeds. But that's right now, that's a sustainable plan, and that's what I would call the backup plan. But we still need to have a lot of discussion in 2015. One more question?
Still the cameras that are worn in your face, right?
Yes, that's where we're going for. The ones on the camera or in the face or eye level that gives you the view of what the officer's seeing.